Good morning. Just going to give everyone another minute or so to join in. Looks like we have pretty good number of people already logged in, but just want to give those people that are just starting their day an extra minute to get all logged in to GoToWebinar if they don't already have it on their computer. Then we will go ahead and get started. I know for me at least, calendars are very packed these days, and so I want to make sure that we get you back into your normal schedule for the day by 11 a.m. Pacific time. All right. Looks like we have the majority already logged in, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'd like to welcome all of you to the California Trailblazer series presented by Shift3 Technologies. I see lots of familiar names on the list this morning, which makes me super happy, but I'm also excited by all the new companies represented on the webinar as well. This is actually the 9th session of the California Trailblazer series, which we originally designed to be a roadshow, thus the name Fresno #2 at the end there. We had hoped to travel up and down this state to meet all of you face to face. Unfortunately, as everyone is experiencing, the universe had other plans, but thanks to technology, we were able to push forward and continue to make connections with each of you and hopefully get out some great content that we feel you could immediately put to use in your own organization, whether that be to increase user adoption, increase efficiency, or to get your Salesforce org operate at the levels that you would expect. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Janae Dubois, the Executive Director of Growth Marketing for Shift3 Technologies. Today's session will include a keynote from Shannon Gregg, followed by a training session from Joe Wheelock. And then after Joe's presentation, we are going to have a Q&A session. So I want to direct your attention over to the GoToWebinar control panel, which should have popped up on your screen when we started this. There is a questions section on there that I want to invite you to go ahead and use. You can submit questions throughout the presentations. They will not disrupt the presenters. We want to collect those questions, and as I said, after Joe's presentation, I will go through the questions that we receive and ask those of both Shannon and Joe. So following the Q&A section, we will have JP Prendergast give a quick overview of Shift3 Technologies. You'll want to stay on throughout the webinar, as we will be giving you some information at the end that you won't want to miss. So with that, let me introduce our keynote speaker for today. I believe many of you on this call actually know Shannon. Shannon is a sales productivity expert with over 15 years of experience. An aficionado of sales technology to increase efficiency in the sales process, Shannon is an early adopter and adoption influencer for sales technology systems, particularly Salesforce and technology that integrates with the Salesforce platform. Shannon is known as a change agent, particularly in the M&A environments, with a successful track record of integrating process, product service pricing, and pricing methodologies, and notably global teams with cultural sensitivity. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon.
Hey, Janae, thank you so much. I'm so excited about this topic today. And thanks to everybody that chose to come see Joe and I give you some really cool information. We are so pumped. Joe and I have had a few conversations about these topics, and I do think anybody who's been on one of these before has certainly learned a lot, but today we've got some really cool stuff to share with you. So thanks everybody for deciding to spend a little bit of time with us. Thanks also to Shift3 Technologies for making this possible. I got to tell you, in this new world of, our pandemic, I have been able to see and learn so many cool things from people in places that I would not have been able to see before, and I hope you all feel that same way too. This is so fun. So today we are going to talk about a brand new topic, which is lightning time, a look at the classic to lightning transition curve. Now, if you are a brand new Salesforce customer or you're thinking about Salesforce, you're going to learn a lot today from the way that the classic to lightning transition was done. I'm going to tell you some very interesting things about how it was handled, what went down, how Salesforce was involved, how companies were involved, and how you can take these lessons back to your organization starting today at 11:02 if you're on Pacific time, and say, how can we learn from this and make sure that our initiatives are really handled in a way that we are able to roll things out and get started on the right foot so that we're not left clawing things back later when it is really challenging to change the way people already feel about something emotionally. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is October 2014, 6 years ago. I know that's crazy because there are people who are probably my age who are like, I can't believe the 1990s were 30 years ago, but here we are, October 2014. So we're sitting at Dreamforce, which is Salesforce's user conference. It's massive. Last year it had over 170,000 attendees. So they've got everybody sitting in the Moscone Center in San Francisco, and all of a sudden, all of the lights cut out. All the attendees are looking around each other and we're saying, what happened? Why did all the lights just cut off in the Moscone Center? What's happening to the power grid? And all of a sudden there were dramatic sounds. They sounded like thunder and lightning, and lights started flashing inside of the Moscone Center. And we realized something big was about to go down. And Salesforce executives came out, Parker Harris dressed in a really cool costume that made him look like a lightning man, and they announced something brand new, Salesforce One Lightning. At the time, if you're scratching your head and saying, what is Salesforce One? I have to know about it. Salesforce One was the mobile app for Salesforce. It is now just called Salesforce. So the Salesforce One was the way that it was announced in 2014. So 6 years ago, we learned lightning was coming. And at the time, we didn't know what that meant. What is lightning? Where is lightning? Who is lightning? What's happening to our Salesforce? Because people who had already been on Salesforce for a long time, and by a long time, I mean that in the technology sector, because Salesforce has been around since 2000, which makes it still a very young product. People were saying, what does this mean for me? How am I going to handle myself? What will I do with the Salesforce One Lightning? What is the Salesforce One Lightning? People were literally sitting on their edge of their seats. It was dark and lights were flashing and there were sounds playing, sort of like you were at the Rainforest Cafe, and everyone was like, what is this lightning? So we knew it was going to be something very big and very dramatic by the way that it was announced. So what happened after that? There was a thoughtful, planned rollout from Salesforce on Lightning. Anybody who attended the last Fresno conversation, we went through a really cool conversation about Big Bang theory in IT projects versus the quick wins approach. And one of the things that I hope many of you garnered from that is that when you do approach things with a quick wins approach, that allows you to have a measured, thoughtful, planned rollout that gains the trust of all of your stakeholders. And Salesforce definitely was taking this approach. So what I'm showing you here is a really interesting picture that was put out by Salesforce in March of 2015 that said, okay, here's what Lightning is. Inside of Lightning, we have the Lightning App Builder. We have Lightning Components. We have the Lightning Process Builder. We have Lightning Connect. And then we've got Lightning Connect Partner Adapters. And this was a really thoughtful way to say, how can we use Salesforce to move beyond the platform? So beyond the Salesforce that we know and love that's sitting on our desktop, or Salesforce One Mobile, if you were using that at the time, to say, how do we harness the power of Lightning? What is this Lightning thing and how are we going to use it? And so one of the things that happened was in March 2015, Salesforce had a whole series of webinars telling you, here's what Lightning App Builder is and here's how you can use it. Here's what the components are and here's how you can use those. Here's what the process builder is. They had something called the Lightning Developer Week. It was a big, whole, thoughtful planned rollout. It was so nice, but people were still challenged by the concept. What is Lightning? What are we doing with Lightning? What does this mean? And so even though Salesforce was approaching it with a thoughtful planned rollout, as they were looking at this to say, we want to take that quick wins approach to change management. We want people to get used to it. We want them to feel comfortable with it. We want them to adapt the new jargon and the new vernacular. One of the things that was very challenging was thinking about the people who were outside of Salesforce.com as an employee. So the Salesforce users were left saying, what does Lightning mean for me? What does this mean for my Salesforce instance that I've already customized, that I've organized? And if you don't already have Salesforce, as you're thinking about this story, I want you to start to think about the systems that you use right now, because that's where you are in terms of this thoughtful, planned rollout. And so when Salesforce came out and said, oh, we've got all the things that you could possibly need, Lightning Developer Week, we've got webinars, we've got Trailhead modules, we've got learnings, we've got one-on-ones, they did everything they could to talk to all of the people who are going to be learning in the learning style that worked for them. They were talking to organizations who were going to be using Salesforce in the way that they like to use Salesforce. And I will tell you, if you were around at this time, the people revolted. The people revolted. It was as close to Les Mis as you can get in a software situation. Do you hear the people sing? That's what they were doing. I put a few of the headlines here for you so you could see. We had blogs all over the place saying UX issues and Lightning experience, they need to be fixed. Lightning layout issues, big challenges in migrating to Salesforce Lightning. And at the same time, because Salesforce had already done their thoughtful planned rollout, they were moving forward and saying Lightning is the way of the future. There's no reason for you to be living in what was affectionately then started to be called classic. And people were looking at things that were really challenging for them and for their users. So they had hard time with text wrapping. The text wasn't wrapping around in the Lightning experience. You will sometimes have seen it called Lex. You couldn't save and run a report the way that you did in Classic. It was very slow. It was the opposite of Lightning. It was not very fast. It took a lot longer for it to build inside of your desktop. And so it felt like you were back in the mid 90s waiting for dial-up to catch up with you. There was a lot of white space. So instead of the really compact, traditional Salesforce view that people were used to, the display density was really wide, and it was hard for people to get used to that. So there were a lot of things that were changing, that were challenged, that were really saying from the user side and from the admin side, hey, Salesforce, we don't like this. This doesn't feel good to us. And then you had organizations that had very high levels of customization and code in their Salesforce instances, which up until that point had been the very key, unique selling proposition of Salesforce. You can take our platform, you can customize it with clicks, you can add code where you need to, and Salesforce will be exactly what you need it to be in your organization. So as Lightning started to roll out with new features, there were numbers that started at 85 that we've seen sometimes up to 2,000, where really cool new things were being placed in the Lightning experience that people really, really wanted to use. They weren't seen in Classic. So people were missing the things that had come to be the way that their organization already did business. So think about your organization for a minute. Have you ever said, that's the way we do it around here? Or our industry or our company is unique because? That's exactly how everybody felt when they were looking at this brand new Salesforce rollout of the Lightning experience. And one of the things that Salesforce tried to do after the big exciting Lightning Developer Week in March 2015 was to say, hey, you have to think about things in a different way. Instead of thinking about the way that you did it in Salesforce Classic and saying, okay, well, now I'm going to take that same philosophy, I'm going to apply it to Lightning, you have to think a little bit differently. And so when you think about that golden triangle, the people, process, and technology, the technology changed, and it was to bring your process along with it. But one of the things that many organizations weren't prepared to do was to change their process and re-instruct their people to catch up with the new technology. And so you had things like you're seeing on your screen right now, which were these giant, bold articles that were written, people that were talking, user groups that were exploding with people saying, I do not want this Lightning. You take this Lightning Salesforce and you just keep it. I just want to stay in Classic. And so people were faced with the giant, biggest challenge you can be faced with anytime you're changing anything in that golden triangle, whether you're changing the way that people do things, the process with which they use, the technology they use, there was not user buy-in. Some people were pumped up about it. They were excited to have something new because they were the types of people that just enjoy having something new. But so many people were revolting against Lightning that Salesforce had to go back and say, it's time for us to reevaluate our strategy. And so everybody's moved over by now, right? It's 2020. Everyone's on Lightning. Well, I bet there is some of you that still toggle back and forth between Salesforce Lightning and Salesforce Classic, which now the vernacular is actually Salesforce Lightning is just Salesforce. So we're to call that just Salesforce. That's the Salesforce experience now. And what Salesforce Classic is the classic way to use Salesforce. So many things were added and so many deadlines were put out that were not really publicized by Salesforce, but we could see them coming about in the user community. So there was an edition of Salesforce that existed prior to what most of us refer to as Salesforce Classic. So that 2005 number that I have sitting up here, there were still some people when Lightning was announced that were sitting on the pre-Classic Classic. And so they still had that UI. So they were looking at that saying, whoa, 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 we haven't even moved over to the Aloha Classic platform and you want us to come to this Lightning thing? I don't think so. That's not going to happen. And so we started seeing things dangled out where there were people that were on a 2005 user experience, people that were on an interface called Classic since 2010. Lightning comes out in 2014. And then we start to see really key turning points in the Lightning lifecycle of 2016 and 2019. And I bet that you, like me, have done some screen shares or seen some demos from people who are using Salesforce or who have built things on Salesforce that are still using Classic because they have muscle memory. They know how to create a report inside of Classic, even though I will tell you now today in October 2020, 6 years after Lightning was announced, it is way faster and easier to create a report and see if you've pulled in the right parameters in Lightning than it is a Classic. But there were so many people whose brain to hand shortcut said, this is where I like to create reports. I've done it this way for a long time. Salesforce never came out and said there is going to be an end of life date for Classic. If you are using Classic, you must cut over by this date or you will be in big trouble. There were huge discussions around how Oracle or Siebel or SAP had really turned off their customers by saying, we know your treasured piece of software is something that is integral to the way that you run your organization, but because we're spending all of our R&D and development time on this new platform, you have to come with us and this is the date. There were some dates that we saw, like October 12th, 2019 was going to be the time that everybody was cut over to Lightning and you had to have it figured out by then. But as of now, you still can access Salesforce Classic if you have an org that's been around prior to the date where all new orgs were set in Salesforce Lightning. And so people who are still using Salesforce Classic, they got stuck inside of the diffusion of innovation cycle being inappropriately or maybe not even applied. So I want to talk about that with you so that you can take this information back to your organization and say, okay, I've got it. I'm going to make sure that if I roll out something new in my organization, and that means anything from a brand new implementation of Salesforce to a new use case for Salesforce, a new application in Salesforce, a new process in Salesforce. Think about this diffusion of innovations approach that we're going to talk about and how you can make this work in your organization. So, what is this diffusion of innovations curve that you talk about, Shannon? That's what you're saying to yourself right now at your computer. I guarantee it. Well, this has been around since 1962, and a professor brought it out, Rogers, and he was talking about how innovations can be diffused. And innovation, in this case for us, we're talking about Salesforce. So we're talking about specific technology. But in the diffusion of innovation curve, a lot of Rogers' research was talking about in communities where they needed them to boil water because the water had to be boiled in order for it to be consumed. So any diffusion that you're thinking about can be a thought or an idea. It can be a piece of your process that feeds into Salesforce. It can be the way that you structure roles on Salesforce. But any way that you look at it, this diffusion of innovation curve really needs to be applied to whatever your initiative is so that you can capture the most people at once. Because we all know that spending time, resources, and money on something that is fabulous for the people who are running it, but does not take into consideration the people who actually have to use the piece of technology, your Salesforce users, it will not go where you want it to go. And it's so much harder to change the mind of a disappointed customer, which are your users, than it is for you to capture them from the very beginning. So the diffusion of innovation curve is a really beautiful bell-shaped curve. And if you look at it, if you love linear symmetry as much as I do, this is the best bell-shaped curve you could possibly get, because you've got 16% of your people on either side who are falling into a statistical outlier, and 68% of the people in the middle who are majority. So let's talk about them just a little bit so that you know how you can identify these people in your organization as you roll out your new approach with Salesforce. So you've got the innovators up in the front here. They're the 2.5%. You know these folks already. They love things that are new. They love new restaurants, and they're going to go there on the first day, even though they know the POS system probably doesn't work right, and the wait staff doesn't exactly know how to run things out to the table in the right order. These people just love to be first. They love to be first to market. They love to be the first ones to try something new. The innovators are going to be the ones who are very easy to grab onto your diffusion of innovation curve approach. Then you've got your early adopters. I love these people so much because they are the ones who maybe don't want to be in your pilot. So as you're looking at people and you say, okay, I want to find people who will be UAT, they will be my user acceptance testers. These will be the ones that I will say, hey, let me sit with you for a minute. I want you to try something out. So open up Salesforce, log in. Now press that button up in the top right-hand corner that has the little picture of Astro, and I want to show you how to load your picture into there. These are the ones that will try it for you because they're interested in it. They maybe will have a few more questions than your innovators, so these are great people that do beta tests for you. They'll ask you, how are things going? Why is it working this way? What's the process? These are the ones that you really want to be on your side whenever you're rolling out something new, a new initiative or a new piece of software. Now you've got the people in the majority. So the 68%, the early majority and the late majority, those are the bulk of your users. So these are the people who are sitting inside of your organization who understand that Salesforce is going to be used to fill this particular need in your organization, and so they're going to use it too. They're part of the majority. They see everybody else doing it, they're also going to do it. So when you're looking at the majority, those are the people that you're going to have to outreach with your diffusion of innovations approach, which I'm going to give you a recipe for in just a few minutes. So at the very end, you've got the people that are called laggards. And I know you know who these people are already. When I talk about laggards, these are the ones that will dig their heels in, that will say, oh, I'm just not a tech person. I'm not a software person. Oh, I've just been doing it this way for so long in my career. I don't want to change it now because I think it's going to affect my productivity. Or these are the people who will say to you, you know what, I've tried it, I don't like it, I don't understand it. Any amount of training you give me is going to be challenging, and they'll dig their heels in. And so if you start to think about your new rollout, what it is that you're taking in Salesforce and putting out into your organization, you can look at these people and say, I get it. I understand what their objections are going to be. I understand how I can overcome them. And furthermore, I'm going to use that with them concept, what's in it for me, to make them feel like they really want to do the thing. So in this particular case, Salesforce used the diffusion approach by saying in March 2015, hey, we're going to have Lightning Developer Week, and we're going to find you where you're at. We're doing webinars, we're doing user group meetings, we're sending you emails, we are going to give you all of the information that you need so that you can get ready to move over to Lightning. Some of the things that we saw come out from Salesforce during that time were the Lightning Optimization Report, where you could get a report that would estimate, based on your system what it would take for you to move from Classic into the Lightning experience. It would tell you hours. It would give you best practices. They gave PowerPoints to you so that you could use those to present to your users to say, let's get used to the new navigation. Let's get comfy with the philosophy of Lightning as opposed to Classic. What Salesforce didn't do, and what they didn't need to do, frankly, was take that approach into each organization. So this depended on the product owner to say, I am going to take that same approach within my organization. I'm going to use all of the things that Salesforce has given me, but I'm going to help get this innovation diffused. I want it to spread throughout the whole entire organization, and I want people to really, really be on board with what it is that I'm rolling out. And so as you're considering your approach, what the next thing is that you're going to be rolling out inside of Salesforce or Salesforce itself is, how can you appeal to all of the people in all of these situations in a way that will allow you to get your innovation, which is, again, anything that's people, process, or technology related, and have that diffused throughout the entire organization so that everybody is using it the way that you had originally predicted and hoped that they would use it. And so, as you're looking at this diffusion of innovation curve, there are some primary components that I really want to go over with you so that you can find the diffusion of innovation theory working in your organization. So you see this lady here, she's a change agent. And so your change agents may be speaking softly and carrying big sticks. Your change agents may be spread throughout your organization. They may be coming in with a very strong approach, but your change agent is the person who's going to say, hey, we've got a new way that we're going to use Salesforce. We've got a new product, a new application, a new implementation, a new integration, whatever the new thing is that you want to run inside of Salesforce. That is what this change agent is going to help you do. You may be the change agent, depending on the size of your organization. You may be pulling in an entire group of people to be the change agents. So as you're looking at your organization and you're identifying who are going to be my beta testers and pilot users, who will be on my user acceptance testing committee, who will be on my standing governance committee, who will be the people that will be holding the change in their hands to help multiply the effect that you're looking to get out of whatever your new initiative is. And so there are 4 primary stages in diffusion of innovation. And these 4 primary stages, you can think of it in just one sentence. So if you're the type that likes to take pictures or screenshots, this is a great slide for you to do that, because as you're taking your notes to say, okay, I want to get this thing rolled out. I've got this new component in Salesforce. I have a new custom object with some automation and some process that's built into it. And I want everyone to use it from the beginning the right way so I don't have to spend time later clawing back bad habits and bad attitudes. These are the 4 stages that I really want you to think about as you put this into work in your organization. And so the one sentence I will tell you is, diffusion is the process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. So that breaks down to these 4 primary elements in the diffusion of innovations curve or theory. And so what I want to give you right now are some thoughts so that you can think about how you want this to roll out inside of your organization as you think about your new Salesforce approach. So the first thing is your innovation. And as we said before, an innovation can be an idea, a practice, an object. It's something that somebody is going to think is new. So it's a new way to do something. It's a new approach. It's a new piece of software. And so when you think about that innovation, the human who is going to be thinking about it, they don't care if it is actually new. So if Lightning is something that is new for them, they don't care that it was rolled out 6 years ago. And there are plenty of people on the planet who have had 6 years of experience with Lightning. That does not matter. What matters to them is that WIFM concept. What's in it for me? You know, this is new to me. Therefore, this is new. This is my innovation. And so the newness of the idea for this individual will help to determine their reaction to it. So as you think about that curve and you think about the person who loves new things, who loves to go to new restaurants, who's into really interesting new bands, who really loves new pieces of technology, hardware, software. Those people are going to react differently to your new innovation than the people who've been around for a long time, than the people who are saying, I don't like new things. I have a challenge with things that are new. I have a fixed mindset, and therefore this new thing, I automatically don't like it just because it's new. And so when you're thinking about the newness of an innovation, some of the things that you can be thinking about are how that diffusion of this new innovation is going to make its way through your organization. So sometimes when you're looking at a new product, you're thinking about the information and uncertainty that the new innovation is going to bring, and that is the perfect thing for you to think about. So you probably have learned somewhere in your career that when you're delivering information, you want to think about the balance between what's going to be easy for somebody to accept and what's going to be challenging for them to accept. In fact, a lot of people who have delivered reviews to employees have learned that sandwich theory, where you tell them something great and then you give them something they need to work on, and then you finish with something great, so that that piece that's in the middle, that coaching piece, can really be received. So as you're thinking about how you're going to introduce this innovation, you want to think about the aspects that will be important to the people depending on where they sit inside of that innovation curve. Okay, so the innovation you're going to be able to identify, because that for you may be, we already have Sales Cloud and now we're going to implement Service Cloud. So in this case, Service Cloud will be your innovation. So thinking about that innovation will automatically trigger uncertainty and consequences to your users. You know about the amygdala, right? That amygdala triggers your fight or flight response. And a lot of people, when they're faced with something that's uncertain, which you've just introduced, when you've introduced a new innovation, causes them to say, maybe I should run away from this. It will be safer for me if I run away from this. Because as it goes right now, I've been in this job for 10 years. I know everything there is to know about the thing. People come to me and ask me questions. And if you introduce something new that gives me some uncertainty and probably some fear that I won't be that person anymore and I'll lose a bit of my identity. And I know that sounds really strong. I know that sounds like a lot of triggers, but trust me when I tell you, whenever you introduce a new innovation to somebody, that's going to be the thing that they start to consider based on where they are on that diffusion of innovation scale. So picturing that bell curve again, if you think about the people who are all the way out at the beginning, who are the early adopters, who are the innovators, they like that uncertainty and fear. They tread in that water. They are really turned on by that sort of thing because it gives them a rush of adrenaline. They love it. So many other people don't, though. So when you're thinking about that innovation decision process for your users, you're going to be thinking about how they gather information, how they seek information, the places that they do that, and do not discount water cooler, which I guess nowadays is probably Zoom or Slack chat, now that many of us are sitting at home, because that is the place where a lot of people are looking for information. So the innovation decision process is an information seeking stage. And so all of your users who are trying to make decisions about your innovation, their innovation decision process is really motivated for them on how do I reduce uncertainty? How do I make sure that as I'm quickly looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of the new innovation, I can do so in a way that will allow me to still be secure, that I know my job very well and people will not think that I don't know what I'm doing, because that is a big fear for a lot of people. And so when you're thinking about an individual who's being faced with a new innovation, they are going to have a ton of questions. So as you're doing your rollout, you want to think about answering these questions for them. What is the innovation? How does it work? Why does it work? And what are the consequences, advantages, and disadvantages for me, for my situation? And so when somebody's faced with something new and you're the one who's bringing that to them, and my guess is every single person who is on this call right now loves Salesforce or the idea of Salesforce, or you wouldn't be spending your time on it. And that is one of the biggest challenges for all of us to overcome as we're addressing our users. They are not starting where you started. You're already at stage 20 and they're still all the way back at -1 because they don't know what it does yet. They don't know how it works. They don't know why it works. They don't know what the consequences will be to them and their job. And they don't know what the advantages and disadvantages will be in their situation. So as you're thinking about rolling this out, some of the attributes of the innovation have to be communicated to your user group. We're going to talk about communication in just a few seconds here, but I want you to think about a few characteristics of innovations as they're perceived by individuals. Keep in mind when we're talking about our users, there will be a social system impact where you can say the sales team, the marketing team, the finance team. And that team may think in a groupthink sort of way that you can shortcut, but as you're considering rolling out innovation, it is so important for you to think about your users as individuals. And so their adoption rates are going to be focused on a few characteristics. The first one is relative advantage. Is this better than what I used to do? If you're rolling out a brand new implementation of Salesforce, yes, there's going to be a key relative advantage to using Salesforce over Google Sheets or Excel documents, pigeon carriers, post-it notes, writing some things on your hand in a semi-permanent Sharpie. Those types of things are pretty easy to overcome. But when you're faced with something like what happened with Lightning and Classic, is that people did not see the relative advantage. They said, hey, my Classic was working. It worked just fine. Thank you very much, Salesforce. And you're trying to take it away from me and you want me to do a bunch of work or pull in some consultants to do the work for me. And it's going to take all of this time for me to move from one system to another and I have no idea why. So the relative advantage has to be considered and it has to be communicated so that the folks who are going to be using it will say, yes, I get it. This is far better than the idea that it supersedes. So the thing I was using before definitely is not better than the thing that you're trying to put in front of me now, dear Salesforce lover. And so there are different ways that you can measure relative advantage, but it's important for you to understand it. My guess is if you're doing a rollout of Service Cloud, in addition to Sales Cloud, you considered some other things too, right? You might have looked at, Jira Service Desk or Zendesk, or, simply using the old pen and paper system that you used to have. So you've already done that work to say, here's what the relative advantage will be. I've laid it out. I have a whole entire spreadsheet where I scored everything and I said, here's where all of these things fell as I considered the different choices that I had. But your users, you're not going to drag them into that because they don't need to know it all. But that means there's a gaping hole for you as you think about relative advantage for all of your users. So you need them to understand and come to a conclusion on whether or not the innovation is better than the idea that was superseding it. Okay? The next is your compatibility. And so everybody who's going to evaluate your new system or what it is that you're rolling out to them is going to say, is this compatible with everything else that I use? And that was another big challenge when Lightning rolled out. A lot of people had customized their classic instance of Salesforce to say, okay, now this ties in with my ERP system, this ties in with my marketing automation system, I've got this tied in with my e-commerce platform, and now there are things that are changing that are going to get in my way. So now I have to spend my time thinking about files, notes, and attachments, and that's something I've never thought about since the first time I did this implementation. And so the compatibility piece is one that all of your users are going to be thinking about when you're rolling out your innovation and hoping that it gets diffused or adopted. This was a huge challenge for Salesforce Lightning when it rolled out based on the fact that Classic had already been so hyper customized by so many of its power companies and users. People are also going to be thinking about complexity. So is this hard? Does it take more clicks? Does it mean I have to remember more passwords or logins? Do you now require me to log in on my computer and getting a code from my phone? What are all the things that you want me to do? So is this innovation difficult to understand and use? Is this something that is going to be really complicated for me? And so this complexity is something that you have to think about in terms of your users as you're rolling out something new. And Lightning felt very complex to the people who were using Classic. They already knew how Classic worked. They got it. They knew how it looked. They knew how to log in. They knew how to answer all the challenges. And all of a sudden, Lightning came along and said, yoo-hoo, dear user, we're going to do things a little bit differently than we used to. And so complexity is something that people are going to look at to say, is this easier? And I will tell you now, today in 2020, Lightning is definitely easier than Classic, just like I told you before about the reports. And anybody who ever built a report in Classic is nodding along with me because they were really challenging. And now putting a report together is probably as simple as deciding what kind of factors you want to go in there and pulling them in and out as you can see what your report's going to take shape like. So the complexity is something you really have to consider as you're rolling out your innovation, as people decide, is this going to be something I'm going to use or not? The next is trialability. So now you know that you have that toggle, unless you have a org-wide default that does not allow you to toggle back and forth, which a lot of people have activated. But now you can toggle back and forth between Classic and Lightning. It did not used to be that easy. It used to be like, hey, it's up to you, the admin of the system. Can people use Classic? Can they use Lightning? Where are they at? What are we doing? And so the trialability means the innovation can be experimented with so that people can start to get a little bit more comfortable with it. They can decide, do I want to adopt this? Because I can try it out and I can see how it goes. You see this at work every time you go to Costco. If you go to Costco and they say, hey, come buy this pancake mix, it will make 20,000 pancakes and it's $12. And you think, 20,000 pancakes for $12 seems like a good deal, but I don't even know if I like the taste of it. Well, guess what? They've got somebody standing there saying, you can try this, you can sample this. There's a little bit of trialability there. And so that's one of the components you can think about with your users, which is pull them in small short bursts and show them here's what the benefit's going to be so they can start to get used to the concept. That goes back to our last conversation about big bang versus quick wins. You're gaining trust whenever you present trialability. And the next one's observability. So allow people to see, hey, here's what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is using Lightning and this is the way that they're using it. Everybody else is using Service Cloud and here's the way that it's working for them. And observability is something that you can build really well in your peer-to-peer networks. So you remember I said a few minutes ago that you want to think about, yes, the marketing team, the finance team, but you also want to think about how to use their peers inside of those teams to address everybody else as individuals. And so as you're thinking about the very first stage of diffusion of innovation, which is the innovation, you're going to be thinking about all of those things. And one of the things that you're going to do that is going to be very critical and really crucial is identifying your communication channels. All right, we all have a favorite way to communicate, right? Raise your hand at your desk if you love being on the phone. Guess what, guys? My hand is not raised. I do not love being on the phone. I am on Zoom calls all day long for work. So the last thing I want to do is for somebody to call me at 8 p.m. just to chew the fat. I don't want to do it. Text me, send me some gifts, shoot me an email, find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're at. But a phone call is something that is really challenging for me. And I bet you have a really strong opinion about this too. Maybe you love being on the phone. That's great. Everybody has communication channels that they prefer. And that's what I want you to keep in mind when you're thinking about your users and how you're going to roll out your new innovation. So when you're thinking about communication channels, that is just simply defined as the means by which a message gets from one individual to another. And so this information exchange relationship can be identified in so many different ways. And in order for you to really diffuse this innovation, this new process, this new technology that you're going to be rolling out to your organization, you want to think about all of the different channels that you have to communicate with these people. So you may say, okay, we know that in our organization, an org-wide email from the president of the company carries the most weight. They love it that way. Your organization may do very well with town halls. So that's where everybody gathers together and the CEO tells everybody live the same information. Maybe the CEO records a video. Maybe there are some people who love to get information in departmental meetings. That's what I really want you to think about so that you can think about how this innovation will be diffused using the proper communication channels. And there isn't one. There's not one perfect one. You can't say, based on all the things we know and all the research that we've done, there is one perfect communication channel, because it all really depends. We're in election season, that's topical. And if you think about all the places that you're seeing ads or messages about the election, they're everywhere. They're pervasive, right? If you get on Snapchat, Snapchat's saying, are you registered to vote? YouTube is giving you election ads. The television's giving you election. So there's so many places that's coming. There are one-to-one outreaches. You're getting texts, you're getting phone calls. It's everywhere, right? But you know it's election season. If you're in the United States, I don't have to tell you what's happening on November 3rd because everyone else has told you, right? That's a really good communication strategy. And so one of the things that you want to think about is whether the groups that you're trying to approach are homogenous and they all have very similar ideals, they have similar groups, they've got some similar approaches. And this is where you may say, I can message the entire finance team at once because I understand the general philosophical makeup of a person that works in finance. They like order. They like for things to add up. They like to get to an answer at the bottom of a problem. And so the way that you use your communication channels to communicate with people in finance may be terribly different than the way you reach out to a salesperson, because the same things that make a salesperson an amazing salesperson can make them really challenging to communicate with, right? They're very good at asking questions. They're very good at playing devil's advocate. They're really, really good at getting to the root cause of somebody's problem, because one of the things they want to do is to help solve it. And so when you're thinking about the way you communicate with the sales team, that will be really different than the way that you communicate with the finance team, right? So as you're planning this and you're thinking through it, I really, really want you to work and think about how you will communicate with these people, depending on who they are. And so one of the challenges in the diffusion of innovations is when you think about that change agent, remember that lady I showed you standing on the train? She looked so cool. How is your change agent communicating with the users? How is your change agent, and again, recognizing that can be a whole group of people, but how can they reach out to the people that need to be communicated to and really communicate to them? Okay, so we've talked about innovation, we've talked about communication, we've got two left, and these ones are really important. So if you're taking notes and saying, when I roll this out to my organization, I really, really, really want to make sure I hit all four of these so that I don't turn into something that somebody's talking about on a webinar 6 years from now and trying to dissect why the thing didn't work, even though it was clearly an amazing, really new and amazing innovation. These are the things I want you to be thinking about. The third element is time. Time is the third element in the diffusion process. So remember I told you, you've been thinking about this new thing for a while. You've been thinking about rolling out a brand new component in Salesforce for a while. You're so comfy with the idea that you are just in love with it. It's so great. You can see it. You understand its relative advantage. You are so sold on it. But you've taken a lot of time to get there, right? You've probably done a lot of undercover work, some detective work. You've built out probably a white paper and defense in it. Maybe you have a business case template you had to fill out. Maybe your SOP tells you have to get prices from 3 different vendors. You've been really thoughtful about this, but you've spent a ton of time. And so one of the things you really have to think about as a key variable in your diffusion of innovation is the inclusion of time as one of the variables. So a lot of times people will set goals and say, okay, we want everything to be cut over by October 12th, 2019. All right, that's cool. So now we have a time bound. We understand when it's going to happen. And we understand all the activities that we have to take in order to get there. So if you're moving from Google Sheets to Salesforce, I get it. You need me to pull together all of my contacts, all of my current accounts, all of my leads, you need them to be in one place because in order for us to install Salesforce, we need all that information. And so you'll set together a project plan depending on how focused you are on that sort of thing. You may say it's time for us to have a Gantt chart. We're going to outline all of the things, but it's time bound. If you're the type of person that really likes using those SMART goals, right? You know, the SMART goals: specific, reasonable, actionable, measurable, and time bound. That time one is really, really important. And so Salesforce did not come out and say, hey, dear customers, Salesforce Classic will be end of life on this particular date. As I told you, there were still people who are back on the 2005 Classic who were not in the Aloha Classic, who were like, wait a minute, you want me to come all the way over there? There was no time bound. And so one of the things that you'll look at when you're saying we've got this new initiative, this key rollout, is to think about what time we have and what time we're going to give to people so that they can understand what the rate of adoption should be and by when, right? So you're going to be thinking about that. And there are sort of 5 steps that go inside of this. And you've got to understand exactly what the time is that you're going to give people the knowledge. You're going to persuade them to use it. You're going to use everything that you have to persuade them to use it so they'll adopt it. Allow them to make their own decision, implementation of the usage, and confirmation of the usage. So you've got to do all of that so that they will say, we really, really want to adopt this. So based on the time that you've given us, based on the dimension of time that you've given us, we totally understand how this is going to go down, and we want to use this innovation. This innovation will be diffused. So some of you who are really, really, really into rates of adoption, statistical outliers, if you love statistics, if you're one of those people, if you think about that sort of S curve, right? Totally different than the bell curve that I showed you a little bit before, but that's the one that sort of ebbs and flows, right? It rolls. People come in and out. That's okay. We're human, right? We're not robots carrying out the brand new thing in Salesforce. So think about that and allow for some time in that. Right? So allow for that time to come about so that people will say, I totally get it. The rate of adoption, the time that we're going to use to measure this, it may be different. The finance team may use it more quickly because they get it. It fits in and you've told them to. And they're basically pretty compliant people because they understand what it means to be held to regulations. Your salespeople may take a little more time because they've got an art that they're trying to address and you're trying to roll out a science, a new technology, a new innovation. And that's cool. And now that's the perfect time for us to talk about the social system. So the social system is a group of people or a group of units that are interrelated that want to solve or accomplish a common goal, okay? So these might be individuals, they might be groups, they might be departments, they might be subsystems. So you may already have a governance committee who works on your ERP system. And that governance committee may consider themselves to be a social system, even though they're made up of people from all of the different departments in your organization. You may have a partner community, you may have partners that you work with who identify themselves as part of a social system. And so as you're thinking about this social system, the diffusion is going to occur inside of the social system, okay? We're social people. The reason why this pandemic is so challenging for us is because humans, by the nature of being human, mostly like to be around other humans, right? We're really social. And so the social system is helpful for you as you're thinking of how you can roll out your diffusion of innovations, because there will be some peer pressure that comes inside of it. There will be some peer knowledge sharing. There will be that peer-to-peer network that you can really, really take advantage of to say, okay, you know, when we're faced with this innovation decision and the consequences of the innovation and the relative advantages of the innovation, I can see everybody else in my team is already hip to it, so I better get there too. And you can really use that to your advantage. So when you're thinking about this social system, they have a social structure too, right? So the way that the sales team structures themselves socially may be wildly different than the way your customer service team structures themselves. And that's okay. You need to take that into consideration when you're thinking about how am I going to get this out there so that people will adopt it in a way that is really thoughtful and successful and positive so that I can make sure that I've rolled it out in the right way, okay? Think about this social structure and the communication structure. So each social structure may have their own communication structure. Think about your own personal self. How many different social systems do you belong to? Well, you have the work you that probably is in a definable team, the executive team, the sales team, the service team. Then you have the social you that maybe belongs to a church or an organization, or goes to a particular type of workout class, or maybe you're a mountain biker. So you think about that, that's your social system outside of that too. One of the things you want to do as you're rolling out your new innovation is to think about how you can use the structure of that social system to help facilitate your diffusion of innovations, because they are going to help you. So when people think about their system and their social structure, they are really going to be focused on making sure that they're doing the things that are best for them inside of that social group. So as people start to make decisions to say, okay, we have some norms, we have some approaches that make sense inside of our social system. In the sales team, this is the way we do things. We log all of our opportunities in Salesforce. Or if you're in a nonprofit and you've got a fundraising team, they understand their norms, right? There are norms that fall inside of the morals and values of that group. And so you're going to look at that system's norms to make sure that whatever their norms are not a barrier to your change, but instead will help push that rate of adoption of the diffusion of innovations in a faster way, okay? So this is where you're going to be pulling on your change agents and your opinion leaders. You will have people that everybody looks up to, right? You know those A players. You know the ones where people say, okay, I get it. If JP's doing it, I'm going to do it too. Because when JP does something, it usually works, and I can see how that is. All right. So you're going to take that sort of person who is the opinion leader, and you're going to say, I know you've got great influence. I'm going to pull you in here early because I really need some help getting this innovation diffused. And so you're going to use that as your communication network so that as people are making these decisions, whether they're optional or not, and that's one of the challenges we have. Hey, you have to use Salesforce from now on. You have to use Lightning because at some point Classic's going to go away. That did not stop people from using Classic. It did not. People kept sheepishly saying, well, I still live in Classic, so don't judge me. But there were a lot of people who did it, right? So even though innovation decisions may not be optional, people still may be saying, I am going to refute and refuse this innovation you're trying to give to me. So by thinking about the social system, you're going to be trying to take advantage of that collective and their authority to make decisions to use or not use something. And so think about these 4 primary stages as you're rolling something out. This can be small, friends. This can be something little. Try it on something little first and say, okay, if I now want people to use the Salesforce lead process in this way, I'm going to try something very small first. And I'm going to think about these 4 stages so I can start to build my own muscle when it comes to diffusion of innovations, right? So you're going to start to think about these 4 stages and how you can put them where they need to go so that you can really get people adopting and using your new innovation. And I hope that you just do that. Go forth and diffuse. Joe's going to give you some really interesting information on Lightning that I think you all are going to love. And after that, we are going to have a little Q&A session. So Janae pointed you where the questions were back then, earlier in the beginning of this call, and we really hope that you give us some questions, because I got to tell you, as I was approaching this presentation, I started thinking about the variety of emotions I went through as I started adopting Lightning and leading teams to use Lightning. And I have had days too during the past 6 years where I have dipped back into Classic because I knew where something was. So think about your questions. We're so excited to answer them. And I just want to thank everybody so much for coming to Shift 3's conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shannon. Appreciate that. So as Shannon was just explaining, before I introduce our next speaker, I want to again draw your attention over to the GoToWebinar control panel. Within that, you'll see a questions section. Go ahead and utilize that to ask any questions that you may have of Shannon and or Joe. And after Joe is done, we'll go ahead, I will collect all those questions and ask those of our two speakers. So as I said, next speaker is Joe Wheelock, a newcomer to Central Valley. Joe moved to the Fresno Madera region in 2018 and began work with the Salesforce platform in early 2019. As a member of Shift3 Technology's Salesforce team, he spends his time designing, implementing, and maintaining the Salesforce orgs for Bitwise Industries, Shift3, and many of our clients. He is a Salesforce certified administrator, sales cloud consultant, and app builder. Outside of work, Joe can be found hiking in the Sierra foothills or playing musical instruments. So Joe, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to go ahead and give your presentation. You should have control now.
Thanks so much, Janae. So like Janae said, I'm a Salesforce certified administrator. I'm currently working for Bitwise Industries as an admin. So I do a lot of internal architecture and admin tasks for the company Bitwise Industries and their many departments and subsidiaries. And I also work as a consultant through Shift3 Technologies, where I've managed some client projects, including a lightning transition in a very mature organization. So like Shannon was saying, Lightning has been available and it's been kind of pushed by Salesforce for 5 or 6 years now, but there are still a whole lot of companies that have not yet made that transition. And I think hear a lot of misunderstandings and uncertainties about what a transition from Classic to Lightning really looks like. So the goal of this presentation is kind of to dispel some of those uncertainties about what a transition to Lightning looks like, and also to offer some high-level advice into some simple ways to leverage the Lightning platform to empower your users and to improve your org overall. So let's start with the basics. A lot of the information I go over in the beginning here might be old news to you, but it's easier to talk about transition when we're starting from the ground up. So first and foremost, Lightning is a modern, flexible user interface. It functions in much the same way Salesforce always has, but it has significant improvements to the look and feel, and it is additionally a whole lot more customizable than Salesforce Classic was. On top of looking and feeling different, Salesforce Lightning also includes a whole lot of tools that are constantly coming out, improving the way admins can build, improving the ways that users can utilize Salesforce. And a lot of these tools that are coming out are only available in Lightning, not usable from Salesforce Classic. And most importantly, Lightning is the future of Salesforce. So all future updates, which there are 3 of a year, they're really going to be geared towards improving Salesforce from a Lightning experience perspective. And there's a whole lot of really cool innovation coming from Salesforce. So if you're still stuck in Classic, you're going to be missing out on a whole lot of those new things that they're introducing. So just really briefly, let's just take a look at, this is one opportunity in Salesforce Classic. This is just the default page layout for opportunities. This is what it looks like in Classic. You can see all the fields there in the details section are controlled by the page layout designed by the admin. On the bottom underneath those fields, those are where the related lists live. And up at the top, you see the little chatter post area. So the same exact opportunity, if we just flip this over into Lightning, looks like this. So you can see right away it has kind of a cleaner, more modern look. The tabs on the bottom are a huge piece of what makes Lightning Lightning. You can see on the left side here, we have a details tab, and these are all the fields, still controlled by the page layout. We have a separate tab labeled related. These are all also controlled by those same page layouts that are built in Classic. We can put chatter and activities in separate tabs, and all of this tab area is customizable. The widths can be changed. We can make custom tabs. We can use these standard tabs. In addition to all the tab features, there's a lot of cool components, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that Lightning introduced including this path up here, which gives a visual idea of where we're at in the sales path on the opportunity. And we have a highlights panel up here that just shows some important fields at a glance. So that's just a little bit brief revisiting of what Lightning is. And here are some things that Lightning is not. Super important concept to get across. Most people may already know this, but it's really important to recognize and make sure that your users recognize that adopting Lightning experience is not moving to a new Salesforce org or entirely new software. All of the data and metadata, so all of your records, your automations, and everything is still exactly the same. Your org is the same database that it always was. But when you're enabling Lightning experience for a user, we're just putting sort of a different layer on top of that database that provides different visibility. Lightning is not an unflippable switch. If you commit to converting to Lightning, there can absolutely be transition periods where users are able to switch between Lightning and Classic if you allow them to do so. They can be Lightning enabled and still have access to Classic if there's certain functionalities or certain workflows that we haven't gotten around to moving them over to yet. And lastly, it is not Salesforce Classic. So despite those last 2 points, it is also important to realize and to communicate to your users that being in Lightning will be a different experience for end users, and it's kind of up to the admins or whoever to communicate that to the users to get them excited about the fact that it will be different, that it won't just be a change to a new system for no reason, but it will actually be different in good ways and will be able to supercharge the way that they use the platform. This also means, though, that there is going to be some work to do, most likely, for transitioning. Yeah, some customizations will need to be replaced or modified to work in Lightning. And users who are really used and dead set on their Classic workflows are going to need to have some communication and support to move them over and get them using Lightning. So the real meat and potatoes of Salesforce Lightning and its UI are Lightning pages. So these are the building blocks. What I just showed you on that opportunity, that we were looking at one Lightning page that was designed to show users opportunities. These Lightning pages are the building blocks of everything you see in Lightning, just about. And Lightning component or Lightning pages are built from custom or standard components. So what we saw on that last page were standard components like the path I showed you, or the standard components like the tabs with included details page and a related list page. Lots of other components can be used, such as third-party components you get from an App Exchange package. You can often just slot them directly into a Lightning page. We can also use things like screen flows that can be an automation that lives directly on a page that your users interact with. And even Visualforce pages can be placed as components directly onto a Lightning page. There are 3 main types of these Lightning pages, which are home pages, record pages, and app pages. We'll go into a little bit of the differences between them in just a second here. And this is a really important piece of flexibility in Lightning. It's that you can assign different pages based on the app and profile of the viewer. So you might have an opportunity layout that a sales user would want to see, and you might have an opportunity Lightning page that the admin wants to see. So just like we can assign page layouts based on profiles, we can also do this with Lightning pages. So we can actually have them see different components on their pages based on what their needs are. So my advice in this section with Lightning pages is to make sure to really utilize these pages and don't be afraid to customize them to best suit your users' needs. You can use custom tabs where needed. You can play around with layouts, and we'll look a little bit at what that might look like. And then, yeah, lastly, Lightning is designed to be a consistent experience across desktop and mobile. So when you create a Lightning page, you can assign it to work the same way in desktop and mobile. It's designed to be as mobile friendly as possible when you just switch between devices. You can also make separate Lightning pages and assign them to desktop and mobile so that your users get whatever experience you want them to have on that particular device. So this is a home page. It's looking a little bit empty because this is in a sandbox environment, doesn't have any live data. But this is just one example of something a little bit different that we can do with a home page. We use list views here with mostly custom objects, custom and standard objects. So that the user, when they first come into this app, they can see exactly the kind of information that they want to see. So they can see when payments fail. We also have down here a dashboard, which is a really good thing to include on home pages in general, give people a nice oversight of what their business unit is doing. And we even have this one custom screen flow right here. What this does is it allows the user to change some key codes in the building that are stored in Salesforce. So this is an automation. We place it directly on their homepage so they don't have to navigate anywhere to access the automation that they would like to have on a regular basis. So this is a little bit of a different sort of homepage. A lot of the time, I would recommend playing around with the standard components that Lightning has introduced for home pages. Namely, something called the assistant is really useful if you have sort of standard sales processes at all. The assistant is a standard pre-built Lightning component. You can just place it right on a home page, and it'll update the running user on leads that have been assigned to them, overdue opportunities, and a whole lot of other standard sales updates. So a piece of advice there for home pages is to check out all the standard components that Lightning provides. You'll find that there's a lot there already built out for you. Record pages are simply Lightning pages that are the way that you look at a record. So when you view a specific record, you're looking at that Lightning page. So standard components here are those details and related lists that are pulled directly from the page layouts, like I mentioned earlier. This path is a great tool that Lightning introduced that is automatically typically used for opportunities and leads, but can definitely be used for custom objects as well. Each of these in the path can be set to a certain status. So when the user changes the status, it'll show a visual of how far along their sales or whatever other process they're in. What's really cool about record pages is the customability of them. It's really one of Lightning's winning features compared to Classic. So just as a demonstration of one way that we've used record pages in a little bit of a different way before is this custom tab, which we've called accounts files. If you have users who want to be able to quickly add files to a parent record without navigating to that parent record, what we've done here is actually made a tab called accounts files and then use a standard component called single related list here, where this is actually the related list of Edge communications, the account. It's their notes and attachments. So a user can go right in here, they can view attachments that are attached to that account, and they can add files directly to that account from the opportunity without having to navigate elsewhere. This is a different record page. This is just kind of to demonstrate that you can play around with record pages to meet your different users' needs. For this particular set of users, we would have a workflow that revolves a lot more around related lists and the information in related lists than details. So we've swapped the column widths. So we have this larger related set on the right. And then we're using a feature called enhanced related lists, which allows these related lists to behave more like list views and display information in a larger form. So then lastly, we have app pages. App pages basically are custom pages that are built the same way as home and record pages, but they're added as a standalone page on an app. So on your app, normally you'll have a home page, you'll have tabs for each of your objects. You can also just have these tabs in your app that take you to a specific app page. I've actually seen this used as even replacing one of those standard object tabs, because those users always want to see a specific set of list views, and they don't necessarily want to tab through all their list views and select the correct ones. So on an app page, you can directly place components just like a home page. You can put dashboards on here, you can put list views on here, you can do automations, you can use third-party components. But one way that we've used app pages in our org is to give our users insight into their internal cases that they've submitted to our admin team. So this shows them 3 separate lists of the open cases that they have been submitted, cases that are in queue or that are currently kind of in progress, and then their past cases that have been closed. It contains a chatter component so that if they've been having conversations around these cases, those will be displayed right there. And it also includes a button right at the top just to make a new case so that it's all contained in one place. So there's all kinds of ways that you could use app pages like this. This is just one that has been useful for us. Obviously, one of the biggest pieces of using Salesforce is visualizing data, and I think Lightning excels at that. So the biggest kind of change here is that with Lightning, we have a new report builder. Shannon has mentioned it in her talk a little bit. The report builder in Lightning might seem a little different at first, but I promise you it will save you a whole lot of time. And it is pretty intuitive, and I think you'll figure it out pretty quickly. There's a lot of new features that come with this report builder as well. You're able to use row-level formulas that can perform calculations right there on the report without having to build extra fields on your objects. And I super recommend using Lightning's ability to use folder hierarchies, so that you can have folders within folders instead of just separate dashboard and report folders for everything. This can really promote organization in your org. In addition to those little changes with the report builder and the reports, dashboards are now just generally a lot more visually attractive, and they're more customizable because they're on a larger grid. And I won't get too into the details of what that entails, but I do want to give a piece of advice. If you are transitioning from Classic to Lightning, your reports and dashboards that you've built in Classic will already work in Lightning. You might need to tweak them to fit onto the grid a little bit better, but something that you need to keep in mind is that if you edit those in Lightning Experience, they are now Lightning reports or dashboards, and they won't be accessible from Classic anymore. So as you're doing this rollout, as you're testing out Lightning, it's important, if you want to be able to switch back and forth and still view these same reports and dashboards, I would absolutely recommend cloning those reports and dashboards and making Lightning versions of them that you can edit and improve in Lightning and still have your Classic ones to go back to. So in addition to reports and dashboards, there's also been a lot of changes to just list views that make data visibility a lot better. One of my favorite features there is the Kanban view. We just have this built into Salesforce. So if you're looking at a normal list view and you go up here to where it has this display as section, you can select Kanban, and with almost no configuration, we already have a working Kanban view, especially for things like opportunities where you have a sales process and you'd like to see totals at the top. You can take just a little bit of configuration on standard or custom objects and make something like this really useful. Your users can drag and drop opportunities or whatever object it is into other columns that'll change their status. And it's just built right into Salesforce without a whole lot of extra work going into that. What you can also do with list views here, I don't have pictures of this piece, but up here in the top, you can actually add a report, or you can add list view charts to a list view so that your users can visualize data that way. And it behaves in a pretty similar way to a report chart. Lastly, also list views in Lightning have the ability to have inline editing so that your users can look at a list view and actually change information directly there in the list view without navigating into each record to make the changes that they need to make. Cool. And then lastly, as far as energizing your users goes, really cool features for admins. You can just have a much more streamlined experience as an admin, and this is going to save a whole lot of time around configuration in your org, and it's going to let you spend more time on addressing user needs and less time on doing tedious tasks. So overall, more streamlined. There may be, once again, a slight learning curve at first if you're an admin who's been in Classic for a very long time, but you'll definitely find the value in Lightning compared to the Classic version. So on the left side here, I just have a picture of what the object manager, a piece of the object manager looks like. What's cool about the object manager is just that it is where you manage all objects, standard and custom, and it's all in one place. And it's super easy to navigate. It's a little bit more intuitive than editing objects in Classic. So when you're looking at one object, the account in this example, we just have the super easy navigable layout on the left-hand side that lets you create and edit fields and relationships, view all the page layouts and their assignments, edit all the Lightning record pages that are associated with that object, and so on and so on. It's all in one place, very easy to navigate. And in a very similar way, the Lightning app builder is a great tool in Lightning as well. So this just lets you create apps. You have a nice, very easy to use available and selected items for the navigation portion. You have the profiles that they're assigned to all in one place, and then you can modify details and branding. You can create a utility bar on the bottom that lets users use utility items that you've made. Just a lot more flexibility there. And then, like everything else in Lightning, the improvements on the admin side are constantly improving, and Salesforce is constantly implementing new tools for new admins. And some of these are overlooked. So some of these include the service setup tool. This is especially if you have Service Cloud, there's actually a separate setup you can go to other than the regular setup. And there's just a ton of flows and like wizard-like interfaces that guide you as the admin through implementing service and other tools to your users. So you actually have kind of built-in backup as you do a configuration and rollout that helps you achieve those things. There's a whole lot of other tools, and I'm not going to list all of them right now, but one of the more recent ones that I think is very cool and very useful is the ability to create objects from a spreadsheet. So you can actually do this directly from the object manager. You basically upload a CSV, and from the spreadsheet, Salesforce will automatically generate a new object, including fields based on an existing spreadsheet, And then the rows of the spreadsheet, you can optionally automatically import each of those rows as records. So this is basically a data import and a whole ton of configuration at one time. So this is super, super useful for standing up new business units or for importing data into a new object from a disparate system and getting everything consolidated into Salesforce. This is actually something that I wrote a small blog post for Shift 3. So if you're interested in that tool, check out the Shift 3 blog. But yeah, mostly I think it's important to realize when you're in Lightning, you are able to access all these new features that Salesforce is constantly implementing that may not be usable in Salesforce Classic. So here is, of course, one of the biggest questions when we're looking at transitioning from Classic to Lightning is everything still going to work that I need? And it has been a long road of getting feature parity up to par, and it is still going on. So yeah, in those years, the 2014, 2015 phase when Lightning was brand new, there was a whole lot of missing features from Classic that people were very used to, and they were absolute deal breakers for a whole lot of people. And just like Shannon talked about, there was a lot of initial backlash against Lightning. Because when it was released, even though Salesforce had a very good plan around its rollout, a lot of people viewed it as not fully viable, not able to replace what they were used to doing in Classic. Since then, in the past 5+ years, there's been a ton of improvement to feature parity, also speeds that Shannon talked about a little bit, and just brand new tools that either replace things that were in Classic or are just completely brand new and can do things that were not possible in Classic. So this is still an ongoing process. Lightning is still changing, but it's a very different beast than it was in 2015. That said, there will still be some things that are absolutely not on the roadmap, and that Salesforce is not really planning on ever implementing in Lightning. Key among those, and kind of big among people who are converting, who have had Salesforce for a long time, are URL hacks and JavaScript buttons. In Lightning, we have something called actions. Salesforce typically recommends using actions or a new type of button they've introduced to replace these URL hacks and JavaScript buttons. They've also released some tools that'll kind of help guide you through replacing those things if your org does heavily use them. So that's just an example of one thing that is not going to be converted over into Lightning, but that they have introduced replacements for and have things that you should do if you're dependent on them. The solutions object is just one example of a whole object that's in Classic that will not be available ever in Lightning, and that's because they're replacing it with Salesforce Knowledge, which is a little bit more robust and is kind of a better way of doing the same thing. Lastly, in that section, the functionality of mail merge is not going to be available in Lightning, and that one has been a little bit more problematic because Salesforce itself doesn't have a built-in solution for Lightning that does the same thing as mail merge. Typically, this is going to be a third-party extension that does this functionality for you. If you need to use merge fields on Microsoft Word documents, you're going to need to probably get a third-party extension. Super recommend checking this out. If you're looking at doing a Lightning transition right now, this page is going to be very, very useful in evaluating what pieces you need to plan around and what pieces are going to be totally unchanged by your transition. So yeah, just search Lightning Experience Roadmap or go to this link, and it'll show you when a bunch of features from Classic were delivered in Lightning, when the ones that haven't been delivered yet are going to come out, and which ones are never going to be delivered because they have replacements. So this is also a huge question. How much time and effort will it take to get my org Lightning ready? So some people think that it might be just flipping a switch, like it might have sounded earlier to them. And of course, now with this transition happening at different companies at different speeds for the past 5 years, this is always a really big question. But basically the answer is it totally depends on what functionality you currently have in your org. So first, is your org heavily customized and complex? If so, that'll add some time. Are your users dependent on URL hacks and or JavaScript buttons? If you have a lot of complex URL hacks, that's going to be possibly more complicated to replace. I will be getting to some solutions for that in the next slide here. Do you use third-party apps or custom solutions that are not Lightning friendly? The good news here is that some custom solutions like Visualforce pages, your triggers, those will totally work in Lightning. They won't require a whole lot of customization or changes to get to work in Lightning. And also third-party apps, very easy to check by going to that app in the App Exchange and seeing if it has the handy little Lightning Ready logo. You'll find that a huge majority of the apps in there are Lightning Ready. So that part shouldn't be too much of an issue, but it is something to check. And then, of course, are your users receptive to change? This is one that Shannon also talked about a bit in her last presentation. Huge piece of doing any successful rollout is making sure that your users are on the same page as you. So if you do have a lot of users who are resistant to change, who are resistant to what they think Lightning is, that's going to be a little bit more work on your end, just bringing them on board. And the big question is, how do I make a plan to convert? And luckily, Salesforce does have plenty of tools in place here that can help you out with that. The first one is the Lightning Experience Transition Assistant. This is totally the first stop on any transition experience. Go to your org, go into setup, whether you're currently in Classic or Lightning, both setups have this. Basically, it has guides, tools, and links that kind of guide you through what your transition might look like. And it has a really handy readiness check feature where it'll actually scan your whole org and it will give you some hour and time estimates of what your transition to Lightning might look like. It'll bring up some potential problem spots in your specific org. And this is totally the first thing that anyone should do if they're going to be transitioning to Lightning. Within that transition assistant, you'll find something called the Lightning Configuration Converter. It can either be accessed within the transition assistant in setup, or you can just find it on the web by typing in Lightning Configuration Converter. This has not been around the whole time that Lightning has, so this is actually a really useful, fairly new tool. And what it does is it'll do a whole org-wide scan and will find lots of components that may need replacement. So it'll try and find URL hacks and JavaScript buttons, like I mentioned. It'll look at outdated Visualforce pages, and it'll go through buttons, links, etc., and just try and identify everything that could be problematic to use in Lightning experience. Using this is also a really good time to check out some of your Visualforce pages and other configuration that have not been used in a long time and just kind of clean those out, because this tool can do that for you too. And lastly, what the configuration converter is actually capable of doing is identifying what some of those problems might be and then actually replacing them for you. So it can find a lot of JavaScript buttons. If they're simple enough in functionality, the configuration converter will actually give you the option of just automatically replacing those JavaScript buttons or those URL hacks with something that works in Lightning by itself. And when I say replace, what it actually will be doing is creating a copy so that the original button is still intact. I still advise doing that piece in a sandbox environment. Then you can play around with the new buttons, make sure that they meet exactly the functionality you need, and then you can introduce them into your production org when you're ready to move users over into Lightning Experience. So with those two tools out of the way and a better understanding of what your transition might look like, the next step is to plan an iterative rollout. In most cases, with most orgs, an iterative rollout is going to be the best way to do Lightning. And this is a little bit like what Shannon was talking about with big bang versus quick wins. With an iterative rollout, you're able to focus on one group of users. It might be one app, one department at your place, and focus on their needs and get them using Lightning one group at a time. So you don't have to worry about your whole org and fixing every single thing, replacing everything at once. You can focus on one rollout, one piece at a time. And while you're doing those rollouts, you can check in and communicate with that group of users on what their needs are and make sure that this goes very smoothly, rather than flipping a switch, forcing everybody on at once, and having pandemonium break loose. So when you're planning an iterative rollout, I recommend checking out departments. Which ones do you think are going to be more receptive to change? Which ones could use the change, could use the features of Lightning? And which ones will be wins for you and your company that'll demonstrate that Lightning is helpful? These are kind of some things to consider when you're choosing which departments to choose next. This is probably the single biggest piece of a conversion into Lightning, which is just communicating with your users. The first step of that being setting expectations. Let them know a little bit what I talked about at the beginning, that we're not switching to a new org, that this will be a different experience, but that we're going to make it a better experience for you. The second step is identifying champions. This is totally where the trialability and observability that Shannon talked about come in. When we say a champion, that's going to be somebody who is an innovator or an early adopter who's excited about change and excited about getting into Lightning and figuring out what it's about. Once you've identified somebody like this, you might want maybe one per department. You might even have a department that serves as champions for you. But what's important is that you keep them in the loop. You let them kind of go ahead and do some trial, let them switch between Lightning and Classic. Keep them in the loop. Ask them questions about their experience so that you can update the app for others. And then they kind of serve a dual function of being a tester for you, and also for getting the rest of their department or the rest of your company excited. They're showing off, that the Lightning transition is working for them. They're getting in there and they're making changes, and other people are witnessing that and seeing that Lightning can be effective for them as well. Then the last piece there is providing training and support. Just like anything new that you introduce, is super important to make sure that you are supporting the users in your org. So definitely schedule training sessions. Even if it seems like you're going over super basic functionality, it's extremely, extremely important to just go over what it looks like in Lightning, how to use it, even if it's the same things you did in Classic. Get them used to the system, and then have an easy channel of communication to provide support to them through. Lastly, if this is all overwhelming to you, if those hours from the readiness check that you did in the transition assistant seem huge, or if you just don't know where to start, I absolutely recommend hiring a consultant, especially if it's somebody who has done something like this before. They might be able to cut away at those hours that the readiness check said, and they'll be good to bounce ideas off of and get a clear idea of where your org is going. And I think that's it from me. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Janae.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate that. And thank you for those that submitted questions via the GoToWebinar control panel. If you still have questions, you want to type those in there. I will try to catch them before we conclude this section. So Shannon and Joe, as the Salesforce product owner in my org, how can I make sure that we have the right approach before we get started launching a new product or feature?
That's a good one, and I bet Joe and I both have lots of thoughts on it. It's good that you're even asking the question, Salesforce product owner. I think one of the things that you really can do is come out with your rollout plan. So one of the things we're so good at as Salesforce administrators is saying, okay, I know I want to design this, I want to put this in the sandbox, I'm going to build it there, I'm going to test it out. So we're very good at following that design, build, test philosophy on Salesforce. But you should do the same exact thing for your plan. I see you're nodding, Joe.
Yep, that's exactly what I would have said. Yeah, taking it in phases, the designing, building, testing, important.
Perfect. All right, next question. You identified that some customizations may need to be modified because of the new Lightning interface. How are Salesforce modifications communicated so that you can identify what customizations will be impacted?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, or at least the easiest step there is using those tools that Salesforce provides. So getting into setup and going to the configuration converter is going to be very, very helpful to get an idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work in Classic, or in Lightning rather.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see. We've been using Chatter to communicate changes and updates. Is that comprehensive enough?
I love Chatter. I love Chatter to communicate. Chatter is one modality. So think back to that communication piece in the diffusion of innovations curve. You want to meet people where they are. You may have executives who fly into Salesforce so they can look at the dashboards and reports and then get back out of there. They're not going to be sitting in Chatter all day, even though you may turn on Chatter Digest for them, let them get it on their emails. So you want to think about people's different learning styles to think about what's the right modality, how can I approach them and meet them where they are so that it can happen quickly and happen in the right place. Keep using Chatter. I love Chatter, but also think about where everybody else might be.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, looks like one more question. If I'm migrating to Lightning, do I need to replace all of my workflow roles with Process Builder and Flows?
The simple answer is no. The complicated answer is it's probably a good idea to start moving that ways anyway, because that's the direction that Salesforce is moving overall. But no, it's not a necessary step in your Lightning transition to replace workflow rules. That functionality is still going to be working in Lightning, but it's still a good idea to do.
Great. Was there anything, Shannon or Joe, that you wanted to add as a follow-up to any of those questions, or maybe something that popped in your head while the other was presenting?
One of the things I really, as Joe was going through his demo, which I loved, is that a lot of times we just remember, we automatically think about documentation, and documentation is like the least sexy part of Salesforce, but documentation is so important, and that's everything from your sort of initial back of the napkin to your Visios, you know, thinking about that sort of thing as your org becomes a living, breathing organism. You want people to go back and say, why did they make that choice? Where did they make that choice? How can I make sure that anything I do from here on out builds on that in case something sort of gets really changed by Salesforce and we have to go back, to the drawing board. So documentation is really, really important.
Perfect. All right. Well, Shannon, Joe, appreciate your time this morning. And we will be sure to share your information so people, if they have any specific questions, know how to reach you. So I'm going to change it over here, and I would like to introduce my colleague, JP Prendergast, who is the Executive Director of Business Development for Shift3 Technologies, to tell you a little bit about our company.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you to Shannon and Joe as well. Yeah, so I'm JP Prendergast. I'm that incredibly influential person that Shannon was speaking about earlier as a real key decision maker, motivator, the person you want on your side, which is Shannon, of course, being incredibly supportive. So anyways, I did want to tell you a little bit about our company, Shift3 Technologies, and also with that, the parent company that we work for, which is Bitwise Industries. So yeah, Bitwise started about 7-8 years ago now. We started off in the Central Valley of California. So we are a Fresno-based company, and we started really, yes, as a company, but more than that, even more of a technology movement, with the idea that you could utilize technology as an industry to revitalize an area. And so with that, when the company launched, it was with three basically prongs of that attack to make it happen that we refer to obviously as infrastructure, workforce, and industry. So the infrastructure side, when you look at the Central Valley, there's actually a great deal of entrepreneurship that was already happening here, and a lot of it was in the tech space. But the challenge with that is that local companies would hit a critical mass and feel like, well, if I want to succeed, I've got to take my idea, go to another market, and make that idea succeed there. So we wanted to stop that and let people know that yes, your ideas for technology can happen here as well. And so the buildings that we have throughout there that represent the infrastructure are really the rally points in our community for that. And so we have 8 buildings throughout California right now, 4 in Fresno, 2 in Bakersfield, which is a little bit south of us, 1 in Merced, and then 1 in the Bay Area as well. So these really serve as the staging points for the other things that we do. The other one is workforce, and that's backed up by a training academy that we have called Geekwise Academy. It's the #1 vocational training school in the US for coders and developers. And we changed our operations up a little bit with the coronavirus earlier this year. But prior to that, we had about 6,000 graduates, all with different disciplines of technology and training, and all designed really to get immediately into the workplace, start making an impact, and helping those companies grow that we talked about, that we convinced to stay locally and make their businesses happen where they live. But also a great opportunity for individuals to, to get involved in technology themselves and maybe transfer from what had primarily been jobs to, careers now in tech. And so that's Geekwise Academy. And then for us, Shift3 Technologies, we're the industry side of it. We are a custom software development firm with a number of different skill sets to include the work that we do on the Salesforce platform. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about us, who we are, as you already learned a little bit from Shannon and from Joe, how we approach things. But to kind of elaborate a bit more in what makes us unique is first of all, the diversity of the group that we have. And so if you see here, if you're looking at traditional diversity metrics, we're specifically going and actively recruiting people that technology has maybe not gone and looked for actively in the past. So we do focus on that from the diversity perspective, but also from technological diversity as well. We do a number of different services. As I mentioned, we've got the Salesforce components and had some great team members on today to speak towards that. But the bulk of the company, our history was in custom software development. And so, with that, you look at all the skill sets that we have listed here, mobile applications, smart websites, which for us mean, very engaging ones, right, that are going to provide you with a high degree of end user interaction and very sophisticated data gathering and metrics and those type of things. And then the way that we provide these services sometimes in quality assurance, if that's something that we provide a company or an existing dev team that needs that support, but it's also inherent to everything that we do as well. And then of course staff augmentation too, where in some cases, you know, especially on the Salesforce platform, if you do need an admin and someone with the kind of understanding of, you know, the people that we have speaking today, just to help guide and develop the org before you really deploy it and launch it locally. So that's a little bit about us as a firm, some of our skill sets and the tenets that we're focused on. A little bit about our team. Irma Ogwin Jr., she's our fearless leader. She was one of the founding members of Bitwise Industries when it started so many years ago. And if you have the time and do a Google search, you'll see all kinds of really great stuff about her background, and how she really is sort of the embodiment really of everything that we're doing, and the real heart and soul of the operation. Chris Hawkins, who's our Executive Director of Software Delivery, making sure that all of the projects and all of the things get rolled out and delivered on time. Of course, Janae, who put all this together, and thank you, Janae, for doing that. And knew that was gonna, there we go, should only be 2 of those. And then there I am as well, you know, incredibly influential person around the company with great ideas that people follow. So that's our team. And what we really want to do here is get a little bit, we talked about the diversity of the group, the diversity of the technology, but sort of more of a nuts and bolts type of thing. And this is going to segue into what we really want to accomplish here, which is, again, the whole point of this is to pass on information and things that we've learned through software development, and then specifically in this particular webinar, what we've learned on the Salesforce platform. But you know, towards that end, where we've been competitive is you look at our end-to-end capability. We learned very early on, and we actually have some clients that are on this call that have experienced where we really do put a lot into the front end of what it is that we accomplish, and that's absolutely crucial. And we'll get into the details of that. In the very early days, you know, I was one of the first probably 10 or 15 people through the door with a company, and it was very, you know, move fast, close deals. Be that salesperson that Shannon was alluding to, that's out trying to work their magic and make things happen quickly. What we did realize early on, though, is that it's far more important to take time and to have that understanding. And like I said, we have people on this webinar today that have experienced this firsthand, where we really want to make sure that we've got a firm understanding of what it is that we're looking to build, and we only engage from there with that full understanding, and truly assessing what it is that we're looking to do. Once we have that understanding, then it turns into the competency of, great, we've understood what needs to be accomplished. How do we then turn around and provide that and put it on the best platform? If it is a downloadable mobile app, if it's browser-based, if it's a smart website, or if it's on the Salesforce platform. And we've been very fortunate, and I know that Joe and Shannon have been a part of some really amazing projects and products really that we rolled out earlier this year that were built on Salesforce, because it absolutely is and was the right tool for the job, and those products continue to grow and expand. And then, of course, the nice thing is that we are local here in the US, and so that logistically has proven to be very effective for our clients here, and just provides a higher level of engagement and really that collaboration that we're looking for anytime you're working in custom software or in incredibly high-end configuration like you see on the Salesforce platform. So with that, this is what I would really like to share with you, because this is our journey. This is how we develop software, and it's very special for us because we really spend a lot of time focusing it and critically thinking about it. But it is universally applicable. This is really how you're going to want to look at any relationship with any software vendors that you have, if they are complementing an existing team, or if they are building something that's going to be a tool for your team. And so this has worked for us, so we want to share that with you as well. Process starts off very simply, engagement, and as trivial as that may seem, and that handshake icon there, that's exactly what it is. It's getting that first impression and making sure that the people that you're aligning yourself with for this project are people that you enjoy working with, because this will be a long engagement, right? It either is going to go very well, you're going to enjoy working with them. We have clients that we've worked with, in particular, I've got one in the ag space that we worked with for probably about 5 years now, and we're talking about rolling out phase 10 of the project. So to have that level of trust, commitment, and to enjoy that working relationship, absolutely crucial. I will also say is that if you end up with the wrong developer, you could also be with them for a very long time because the project is just going to take longer. So certainly worth investing in that first impression and finding out. From there, for us, we go into that immersion phase, which I mentioned before, where we're going in and we're doing the research and we're listening. One of the big mantras for Shift 3 is that technology is not the end, it is the means to the end. And so it means we need to understand how we're applying it. We need to understand the industry. We need to understand what the objectives are. And we can't be omnipotent and understand all different aspects of every business. That would be literally impossible. And so immersion is understanding what we can. And so gathering that information and then turning around and presenting it back, right? And all of this is before we've even really started writing a line of code, obviously, or anything like that. It's really all planning, and that starts with listening and then turns around and we take what we've learned from listening and put it in front of you and say, look, when you said this, this is how we interpreted it, and this is what we think is the solution. Does that work for you? And we keep going back and forth in that loop between immersion and envision of saying, of listening, of responding, in any classic listen and respond exercise. And we document it as we go, and we put the scope of work as we develop it in front of our clients. And we keep working on that together until we get to a point where we say, you know what, this is the project. This is what we want to do. We've eliminated as many variables as we can. We understand that, yes, probably some will come up as we move forward. But through these conversations and through these meetings, we agree that this is the project. When we reach that spot, we then transfer over from the planning stages to the development stages. And that's where the script flips a little bit. And that now we're continuing, we're producing the content. We're now saying, these are all the things that we agreed we're building. Now we're validating those with you, right? We're getting that document that we were saying, is this what you want? We've now turned that into code. We've now turned that into a product. We've now turned that into an application. And we're making sure that those workflows and all the things that were words on a document are now being expressed in a way that makes sense. And running that past our clients and getting it validated. And then this is where we'll spend some time in that loop as well. Between execution and validation, in the same way that we did with immersion and envision. It's constantly checking our work and not running off in one direction and going too far down the wrong road, going too far into a rabbit hole that we should, but really just making sure that we understand the use case of the technology, because that's the key and that's what brings us all together. And then finally, in the same way that we all got on the same page after envision before execute, where we said, great, this is what we're going to build, let's take that next step. We do the same thing between validation and delivery, and that is where we've done the user acceptance testing. We've really gut checked everything. Our collective team feels great about what we've put together and deliver the deployment of that. And that's where we get into all of the stuff that Shannon is talking about the adoption, right? We roll it out, we make sure that the workflows make sense, we validate as much as we can, but then we put it out into the world and we continue to get feedback and grow and develop as needed from there. So again, we work very hard. I'm sure to a certain degree, maybe this seems simple, but it's worth taking the time on each of these steps, and it's worth placing that value on all of them, because that continual communication loop in software development obviously is completely crucial. And we just can't emphasize it enough, which is why we wanted to pop in today and speak a little bit more globally about not just the particulars of Salesforce, but just about engagement with software development as a whole. So that's a little bit about our customer journey. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Janae to bring us home. But thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Great information. Thank you to Shannon. Thank you to Joe. Thank you to Janae for bringing us all together. And I hope everyone has a great week.
Great, thank you so much, JP. So for those of you that have made it all the way to this point, I thank you for staying on. I know 2 hours is a big chunk of the day. We have recorded today's webinar, so for those of you that want to revisit some of the stuff that Shannon and Joe presented today, or maybe you have a colleague who you feel would benefit from the information, we will be sending out an email by tomorrow morning with links to both the recording of the webinar itself as well as the deck. So additionally, before we depart, I wanted to let you know that we would like to send you a thank you gift for attending today. So please follow the instructions in the email that you'll be receiving so that we can get that out to you. Thank you again to Shannon, Joe, and JP for today's webinar and for all of those that registered and attended today. I hope that you all have a wonderful week and stay safe.